Welcome to the podcast, The Unselfish Purpose of Life. More than 15 years ago, I had a radio show on a station. It was a monthly show, and we discussed the purpose and value of unfolding the full potential of life. And this discussion centered around the most basic value of life, which is the essence of who we are, and that's our awareness, our consciousness. And also we discussed its many angles and disciplines to understand the value of consciousness in active, daily, responsible life. Consciousness is the basis for our perception of the world. It comprises levels of wakefulness, awareness. And as I've mentioned in other podcasts and in my introduction, that's a very brief version of the definition. We are going to dive more deeply in the near future into what consciousness is. In fact, it's all there is. A wonderful book by Dr. Tony Nader. Well, many of my shows were podcasted at the time. And since they're on the station's website and everybody's doing a podcast now, I thought, okay, well, let's put it on a more visible platform. So that's what we did. And so today, what I want to do is discuss a particular topic, something that we do all the time, and that is make decisions. We make many in a day and many, many over a lifetime. And some years back, I taught the Transcendental Meditation technique to an expert in the brain. And she told me that on average, we have 70,000 thoughts in a day. Because I said, oh, we have a ton of thoughts. I thought that was accurate, but she gave me a better number. So 70,000 thoughts in a day. How many of those are decisions that you're making? It's not just about what's for lunch. It's what am I going to do for lunch? What am I going to have for lunch? Well, my name is Kathy Connor, and I have been exploring the field of human potential for more than 50 years. I am a certified teacher of the Transcendental Meditation program, and I teach this specific and very special technique in the public. So please enjoy the discussion today on decisions. Well, how effective are our decisions? How progressive and life-supporting are our decisions? And how can we improve the process of making good decisions that produce best results? How can we become more competent to make right decisions for all good, not just for ourselves, but for the whole, for the environment as well? Well, these days we closely watch the news and we react to the decisions of our government leaders, local and national and global. And midterms are around the corner, so we're going to be making decisions about that. And are our decisions good? Are their decisions good? Do they generate the greatest good for all the people? So there could be discussions that we'll have like immigration, climate change, all kinds of things. How does the person we're interested in, how will they make decisions that will reflect our thinking, our decisions? How do we know what's the right decision? How can we accomplish any aim we have without creating harm? How can anyone, not just government leaders, know we are making right decisions for best outcomes, especially if that decision will have far-reaching effects? Well, that's a lot of questions. We can take them one at a time, but let's not take up too much time doing that. Well, so here's a few more. How do we know if a thought, which is the basis of a decision, is the right thought? Do we try to think of a right thought? Any conscious attempt on the part of the mind to entertain only right thoughts will only mean straining the mind. So let's say we're trying to be 6 feet tall when we're only 4 feet. Well, you can't stretch yourself. We can't attempt to create right thinking by force or control. We have to experience the field of the mind where clarity, harmony, and peace exist and bring those elements to the surface. This is an expansive area of the mind. The treasure is at the depth of the ocean. You can imagine you have it and act as if you do when you don't, and we're going to know. Or you can dive into the ocean to retrieve it and bring it to the surface where it's useful. In order for the mind to be successful in entertaining right thinking for best decisions, it needs to be cultured so that naturally it can perceive those kinds of thoughts because it has access to them. The mind established at this level, those quieter fields, more expansive fields deep within everyone's mind, will naturally experience wider vision for better decisions. So what can we go by to determine right thinking? Is what kind of effect that we can consider what kind of effect that thought has, or does it produce a good, useful, life-supporting effect, not just for the decider, me, but for others? Is it possible to have this kind of thinking? Well, the short answer is yes, and the reason is, well, that's what we all want, so that would be a natural thing to have. In order to make good decisions from a healthy, clear mind, wouldn't we all want that? And sometimes that might sound unattainable, especially if we're feeling anxious and overwhelmed. We have these kinds of thoughts in our lives from time to time anyway. We call it intuition. When you know something, you just know it. Somebody says, let's go on this trip, and suddenly you have a funny pit in your stomach. You say, you know what, I have a funny feeling about this. I don't think I'm going to go. Well, they might make fun of you, which, people like to do that. But you don't go. You stick to your guns and you don't go. Well, when they come back from the trip, your friend says, oh, you're lucky you didn't go. We were chased by a bear. We had all kinds of problems. Well, you didn't know the details, but there's some abstract part of the mind that's very clear and accurate. That's when you'll have intuition. But there's even more to the mind than that. But to function from that level on a regular basis, wouldn't this be what we want? So we've seen how decisions that are made by others, like people in charge, executives, administrators, in their fields of business, even in health, for example, how they've affected everybody. Many times this happens. Maybe a business starts up and we're told that product A is fine, but then decades later we find out that there was an element in it that caused cancer. In the field of health, we've seen this too, where we were told that pain medication wasn't addictive, and we know what happened with that. Okay, so here's the deal. We tend to just accept things as they come across the table, but if we're making a different decision, then we'll make a decision based on that clarity of mind. Then we're not necessarily influenced by other people's decisions necessarily. But let's examine for a moment how we can improve our decision-making capability. And the quick answer is we need a wider perception, a broader awareness, a more refined, settled, broader awareness to take in the whole so that when focusing in on the part, the whole is not lost. With this kind of awareness, one would not do something for just personal gain, even if that's a potential, but the decision wouldn't be harmful to others. And being able to see how the decision affects others is part of the improvement of the decision-making process. From the platform of greater comprehension, greater awareness, better decisions are made. That just makes sense. Okay, if we live in the ground floor apartment of the high-rise building, we can see what's right out the window, maybe just the tires of the cars. Okay. But if we rise through the different levels of the building, we begin to see more of the surroundings. And when we graduate to the penthouse, we have a holistic view. We see the park in the corner and we see the mall at the other corner. The decisions that we can make from that kind of broader awareness is different than if we just see the tires of the car. Well, it's the same for the mind. From a more narrow platform of awareness, one's decisions will not have the same effect as a decision made from a wider horizon of awareness. Decisions made from a wide horizon of awareness have a greater range of influence. If one's awareness is broad, if one's consciousness is full, it's easier to zero in on the issue and not lose the wholeness. It's when the wholeness is lost or not considered at all that decisions are self-serving or agenda-based, and these decisions tend to be more limited in scope. Well, the bottom line is, If we don't have the big picture, we don't make the best decisions. That's simple enough to understand. We've had that happen in our relationships. Not having the broadest view. Maybe the best intentions are there, but without a broader view of cause and effect, that can usually, and often does, make a mess of things. And again, we've all been there, right? We didn't have all the information. We made a quick judgment based on what we did know, only to discover that this was based on partial information or wrong information. A different decision may have been made if we had all the correct information for a better outcome. And to have this kind of spontaneous result, where the awareness is broad and the decisions are more life-supporting, we actually need to do something about that. We need to cultivate that level of awareness that can maintain tranquility within amidst activity. What we need to develop is refined values of the mind. That's where this is happening. It's not our feet that make the decision. Although there is a song. You remember this song that says, "Feet don't fail me now"? But it's the mind that moves the feet. Well, first the mind makes the decision. There's a thought, actually, first. And the brain begins the process, and the feet respond. Well, it happens pretty quickly. Okay, so now we need to examine the mind. The mind has a range of experience. It's from active to silent. And we like to compare the mind to the cross-section of the ocean. The surface is more active. We all know that. We've been swimming on the surface, and the waves are crashing. But if we're a deep sea diver, we know that's a little different than being affected by the waves crashing on the surface. The depth is settled. It's less active. The active aspect of life we know very, very well. It's what we were encouraged to know in our education systems, in our cultures. It dominates life so much, some will scoff at the notion that there's even a field of settled awareness within the mind. Well, maybe they haven't experienced it. This level of the mind has been described throughout the ages. People have long sought to obtain it, to even glimpse it, but we all have it within us. It's been blocked, but it is natural. It needs to be unfolded. Yeah, we do need to do that work, but it's really not work because you could do it with your eyes closed. You can wait for the Powerball ticket to show up, but you do need to do something. You got to go out and get a ticket. So I'm going to share a few examples through the ages of people who have experienced this deep peace within the mind. We're going to start with Lao Tzu from the Tao Te Ching. He said, "Where there is silence, one finds peace. Where there is silence, one finds the anchor of the universe within himself. To obtain Tao, reduce activity, reduce and reduce again, until all action is reduced to non-action. Then no one is left. Nothing is done, yet nothing is left undone." And another quote from Saint Teresa of Avila. She said, these are their words, "My soul at once becomes recollected, and I enter the state of quiet, or that of rapture, so that I can use none of my faculties and senses. Everything is stilled, and the soul is left in a state of great quiet and deep satisfaction." So now we're going to move forward a little bit to the Western culture. Ralph Waldo Emerson. He said that great nature in which we rest as the earth lies in the soft arms of the atmosphere is that unity, that oversoul, within which every man's particular being is contained and made one with all other. We live in succession, in division in parts and particles. Meantime, within man is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty to which every part and parcel is equally related, the eternal one. And his buddy Henry David Thoreau, he said to be calm, to be serene. There is the calmness of the lake, where there is not a breath of wind, so it is with us. Sometimes we are clarified and calmed healthily, as we never were before in our lives, not by an opiate, but by some unconscious obedience to the all just laws, so that we become like a still lake of purest crystal, and without an effort, our depths are revealed to ourselves. All the world goes by us and is reflected in our deeps. Such clarity. Black Elk, in his words, he said, "Of all the created things, our beings in the universe, it is the two-legged men alone who, if they purify and humiliate themselves, may become one with, or may know, Wankantanka, which is the Great Spirit." And last, but definitely not least, one of my favorite quotes by Howard Thurman. "There is no clear distinction between mind and spirit, but there is a quality of the mind that is more than thought and the process of thought. This quality involves feelings and the wholeness in which the life of a man has its being. What is being considered is what a man means totally when he says, 'I am.' This self shares profoundly in the rhythm that holds and releases but never lets go. There is the rest of detachment and withdrawal when the spirit moves into the depths of the regions of the great silence, where world weariness is washed away and blurred vision is once again prepared for the focus of the long view, where seeking and finding are so united that failure and frustration, real though they are no longer felt to be ultimately real." Now he gives more of a clear explanation of the thinking process, the decision process. But there's one more quote I want to share with you, and this is a field of life many people know. It's called yoga. I think you've heard of it. Well, yoga comes from the yogis. One particular yogi brought forth this knowledge of yoga. His name was Patanjali. And those of you who may be familiar with Patanjali, you know he put his steps of yoga, really limbs of yoga, in a book called the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, put them all together. And there are 195 of these sutras. There are verses explaining yoga, expanding its understanding. I'm going to tell you the first two verses, which really encapsulate everything that yoga is. Well, you do need to read the rest of them, but the first verse, he says, "And now the teaching on yoga begins." Okay. And it's the next verse where he explains yoga in full and then explains it for the rest of the 193 verses. He says, "Yoga is the complete settling of the activity of the mind." Okay. So that's essentially what yoga is. So he's explaining to us that we do have this settled mind within us, and from that settled mind arises what? Well, thoughts. And thoughts are the basis of the decisions that we make. Okay. So there are many examples through time of this amazing kind of experience of this level of the mind. It isn't exclusive to certain people. If you have a human nervous system, a mind body, you have the same hardware and software that these people had who have these experiences. So these examples go across time. Lao Tzu lived thousands of years ago. Howard Thurman was 20th century. So everyone I quoted mentions the stillness, the silence. And every one of us has this level of pure consciousness within. Everyone has the ability to cultivate this level of awareness so that it is practical and useful in active life. It's really a matter of silencing the activity, but not with force, because that's counterproductive. It's like spinning the tires in the mud. You're not really going anywhere. I like to call that the cosmic hamster wheel. You're just going on and on. All right. Focusing or forcing the mind, it doesn't give the experience of its depth. And why is that? Because they are verbs. You're creating activity, you're not refining it. If we want to experience that field, which already exists, because you don't have to create it, it's there, we just need to access it. Decisions come from the thinking mind. We need to add this word thinking because it's important to the discussion. A lot of people think we're supposed to remove the thinking mind, thoughts from the thinking mind. Well, when I say that to someone, it allows them to think a little bit, go, Well, if you couldn't have a thought, then you can't get up out of the chair. I'd like you to leave. So don't do it here. The thinking mind is an amazing thing to have. Look at the stuff we can do with it. We can comprehend the beautiful universe. We can see sunsets and appreciate the beautiful faces of our loved ones. But it's the quality of the thinking mind that we are addressing here. Ideally, thought should consume the least amount of energy and have the most powerful result. Not only powerful, but right with no useless or negative thoughts that can occupy the mind, but thoughts that are evolutionary, the greatest good for the thinker, and harmony for the surroundings. Well, is that what we have today? Well, that sounds nice. It's efficient. It's harmonious. It's very real and possible. We have this capability. It's a matter of opening to who and what we really are. It's a matter of going beyond the noise of the mind to experience its finer values. To have a thinking mind that naturally reflects these qualities, it's necessary to go beyond the surface thinking mind, where the mind is influenced by boundaries, by what we'll call limitations. This is what transcending allows. Transcending gives the mind access to those more refined values, going beyond the limitations, we'll say, even beyond the boundaries. It is the settling of the active mind through the thinking process, but refining it. But again, it can't be forced. You can't have the intention to, I'm going to sit in. No, that's a thought right there, because there's energy created there. In other words, you don't desire this experience and expect it or aim for it. You dive in. We have a habit of controlling the mind. It's how the mind was trained, and we're not blaming anybody. It's trained to function in the boundaries. That's not a bad thing. You do need to know that you stop on red and go on green. It's important to have some awareness of the boundaries. But these same rules of the mind and the outer world, they're not going to work in that most refined value of the mind. So controlling the mind to experience silence is what one attempts to do with no real understanding or training. And again, there are verbs in there. That's not going to happen. So it's not necessary or productive to force the experience. The mind knows how to go within. It's its nature. It's moving towards something more pleasing. You do it all the time. You make decisions in that regard all the time. Even the simplest thing like changing lanes. Why did you change lanes? Well, I was behind a slow vehicle and I'm late for an appointment. Okay, that's a split-second decision. We're making decisions all the time, but ideally, without the stress clouding in the way, the decisions are to allow us to progress in life. So, for the breeze to come in the room, you got to open the window. If you want to experience this fine value of the mind, you got to do something for that mind to experience it. Again, based on the nature of the mind, but we have to engage that. For the mind to settle to this broader, more orderly state, it will go there if given the right direction. Trying is counterproductive, remember. It generates energy and activity when we are speaking of a restful state, a less active state in the mind. Now, transcending connects the mind with its source, which is another word. Well, there's another word for it called pure consciousness. And pure consciousness is a uniquely different experience than just, say, sitting there with your eyes closed. In this scientific age, we can differentiate what the experience of the mind is based on the condition of the physiology. With regular exposure to this field, or when you learn the TM technique, you do it twice a day. With regular exposure to this experience and contact with these finer fields of the mind then has the opportunity to become familiar. It can adapt to functioning from that level in that peaceful state. It's also called equanimity. It's also called the source of thought. It's another name for the depth of the mind or pure consciousness. So we're creating a new habit, and this brings the qualities of pure consciousness out into active life, which is the purpose. This is the experience that transforms the mind and provides a new level for life to be lived. This is moving on up to the penthouse. There's no point in just having a story to tell. It must have some real purpose, and that is to unfold the potential of the mind. It's from this level of the mind that thought is most powerful and right. And now that level of the mind is familiar and is available to us all the time, not just periodically. The transcendental meditation technique is actually a bridge connecting the outer with the inner and bringing the qualities of the inner into the outer so that life is better. This has all along been the purpose of meditation. It's not a fix for the moment, but a permanent improvement so that life is lived on the platform of clear, efficient, kind, expansive thinking, which results in good decisions. Draw the mind back to the source of thinking, and this is the process of the TM technique. And clarity of thought depends on the state of the mind and the nervous system. Clear thinking is the result of a broader awareness and an integrated, refined nervous system that can support this experience. So repeated exposure allows this orderly state to become a part of the experience all day long. And that has to mean your physiology is changing. We've already talked about some of the research on TM, so I might mention a few things, but the individual nervous system is the reflector of consciousness, particularly pure consciousness, which is blocked for the most part, the depth of it. So how pure is our consciousness? It depends on the reflector. If the reflection is weak, it's associated with limitations and boundaries, and that is the dominating experience we see, around us on the planet these days. But it's possible to change the value of the reflector so that we become aware of the other side of the coin, the area of the mind where the boundaries do not dominate. They're there, but they're not overwhelming anymore. That's because you have the wholeness, pure consciousness, with the parts. This underlying experience has always been there, but the integration of it in our daily lives has been missing. The only new element is a process of locating it with regularity. It's not a one-time fix-all things. So that it's useful. It becomes an equal factor in the active outer life, not a hidden one that only a few describe, like our lovely quotes we had. That's available to everybody. We have a mind-body. They are intimately connected. For the mind to function well, the body is also required to function well. Physical wellness is a prerequisite for anything to be successful that comes from the mind. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to have perfect health. It means you want to have less blockage, less stress. Like here we have this experience. We know what this is. When we don't sleep well, then the next day we might be a little foggy, maybe not so clear, maybe even a little crabby. If you don't get enough sleep, the mind's not as sharp as it can be, and as a result, maybe we don't make the best choices. We absolutely know what the results are regarding our decisions when we have stuff in our system that might not be great for decision making, like alcohol or something else. There's lots of apologizing going on after some drunk dialing, or so the brain's not working right, so decisions aren't going to reflect a good quality. So the mind's not a subjective, mind is a subjective thing. It's not a tangible thing, but the brain is. The brain's tangible. So if we look to the brain, we can determine the health of the mind. Now, I have talked about this already. We talked about the brainwave activity. But the brain is essential to the discussion of decision making because the process of decision making, it occurs in the brain. Well, there's a thought that's more abstract, but the brain is processing that. Particularly the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain just behind the forehead. That's the main reason you want to wear a helmet when you're out on your bike or motorcycle. And your whole brain's important, but this is an important part of the decision-making process, as well as other executive brain functioning. The prefrontal cortex is important for that. The functions of the prefrontal cortex, for example, it determines our alertness, our ability to focus, our values, moral compass, motivation, creativity, decisions, and some self-control. Lack of proper development of the prefrontal cortex results in impulsive decision-making. And impulsive decisions have a higher percentage of chance of not working out so great. I think we've been there too. Now, stress is a considerable factor in whether we have good health and consequently make good decisions, because stress affects the entire physiology, including the brain. Excess stress actually inhibits good decision making. And we know this too. If we're under stress, the prefrontal cortex actually shuts down. It goes offline, you can say, and that means the reactive brain steps up and takes over. Now, that's not a bad thing to have if you're being chased by the bison, like that guy, where was he? Colorado or so, Yellowstone. Okay. If you're in an emergency, you're not going to say, oh, what kind of bear is chasing me? I think it's, I better get out of here. Okay, the impulsive brain is there for a reason. But here's what's happened, particularly in our culture. The prefrontal cortex shuts down too often, and the impulsive brain gets a little too active so that it starts to become a habit. We don't want that. We want the opposite. Now, research has shown that excess stress impairs the prefrontal cortex, and that affects decisions. There's studies in animals that have shown that specific neurochemical pathways, when activated by stress, cause problems for the prefrontal cortex. So that's the same thing that happens for human beings. Now, transcending settles the internal state of the mind and body. It provides an experience characterized as restful alertness. The mind is awake and aware. The body-mind is also rested at the same time. When the mind transcends thought, it experiences its essence, and that's pure consciousness, pure awareness. It's being, and is the essence of the mind. This is the state of maximum order, maximum stillness, and there's levels of that. So we're not aiming for it. The mind can slip in and out of that to experience it, to be more familiar with it. The experience of restful alertness is the foundation for the mind and body to rebalance itself. And there are many neurological and biochemical changes that take place in this restfully alert state, also known as transcendental consciousness, because it's not ordinary waking state anymore. It's not sleep or dreaming. Mind's awake. But at the same time, there's deep, deep rest. It's not the same as waking state. So it's a fourth state of awareness, fourth state of consciousness, actually. There's less respiration, for example. There's significantly less cortisol, as much as 30% in many cases. That's the stress hormone. There's an increase in serotonin. That's the neurotransmitter associated with mood, balance, and happiness. And there are many other indicators that the physiology is changing during the practice. The evidence includes reduced anxiety, and even heart disease can be affected due to the restorative value of this state of rest during this experience of transcendental meditation, which gives this experience of restful alertness. Now, brainwave activity, we've talked about that too, and we all, I guess maybe we're getting tired of hearing about that, but just for a second. During the TM practice, it shows a strengthening of the neural connections between the different parts of the brain. That's called coherence. And that is including the prefrontal cortex, which promotes better learning and decision-making, as mentioned. Now, the experience of transcending also calms the amygdala. That's like a walnut-sized piece of the brain. You don't want to take it out because you need it if you're being chased by the bear, remember. But it's this stress alarm or fear center. If it's too hyper aroused, the amygdala causes overreaction. That's a debilitating experience that many people with post-traumatic stress have. Now, this hypervigilant state, it's the opposite of restful alertness. The mind's not settled, and it can't even turn off the agitation in some cases, which means it's difficult to rest. It's not easy to sleep. And without rest and sleep, the physiology can't function. This is really a very unpleasant experience. Now, if we're familiar with the experience of restful alertness, if we do TM or we've experienced it, it can stabilize and become part of the day-to-day life. It's just not something that, we have a story to tell. It's from this restfully alert state of mind-body that spontaneously thoughts are more in tune with that orderly brain functioning, or we could say nature's orderly functioning. it's spontaneous, which means it's a natural state. It's not a contrived state, and nature knows the difference. We want to base activity on the field that is not active. It sounds counterintuitive, but think about it for a second. We always go in or down before we go out or up. How do we build a building? We just put the penthouse on first and then do the foundation. No, that's not going to work. No, we build the foundation. You want to shoot an arrow? Well, you got to pull it back first if you really want to do it right. So minimizing activity in the mind is actually a pretty good idea for best results. So cultivation of a level of awareness from these quieter levels, the level of depth and evenness, clear, settled mind, is a natural result of the experience of transcending. The mind can work more efficiently when it has this settled platform. There's so much bombarding the brain these days. I think that's something we all are aware of. With all these electronic devices, it's not just phones, it's all kinds of stuff going on. The constant news channels, the streaming platforms, that there's just so many. There are hundreds of shows to choose from. It drives me nuts. The social media, there's a lot of stimulation out there. Without going beyond this stimulation, even on occasion, you don't have to go away from it totally. If activity is ruling the day, then the mind can become stressed and overwhelmed. But as we have seen, that also affects our decisions and maybe not the best positive direction. So we're going to go inward for a little while. We just put the device down, and it's not very long. We want to cultivate the mind-body to function from this state of restful alertness so that activity, no matter how much, it's never overwhelming because we're established in this state of restful alertness throughout the day. That's the idea. Again, that's what we're doing this for. And we can unfold more of that potential which exists deep within ourselves, in our mind, in our own awareness. All of the parts of our lives will be enriched from this level of wholeness. You can't improve the parts without support from the whole. Decisions are an essential part of our daily lives. To improve decisions, broaden awareness. We would like this for ourselves, but we should be sure our leaders have this quality too. Wouldn't that be nice? I have this thought. I'm going to share it with you. It's kind of a weird thought. But I think maybe sometime in the future, maybe we won't have to spend so much money and years of campaigning. Maybe we just say to the candidate, let's see a run out of your brain patterns. Let's see if they're working right, so we'll elect you. I don't know if that's going to work. But, if the brain is orderly, then there's going to be orderly decisions. That would be an interesting thing to do. Okay, so it's been a joy to talk to you about decisions. The sage advice for for today is for ourselves and eventually for our leaders to cultivate broad awareness for decisions that generate the best nourishing results for the whole, not just for ourselves, but for the community, for the nation, for the planet. So I thank you for making the decision to listen today to the podcast and listening to it all the way through. So I wish you deep peace and happiness.